Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to our short press briefing. And the purpose of this gathering really is to be a bit of an appetizer to introduce a campaign which we're going to launch officially on Saturday. We're launching a campaign called Relief to Resilience. And we're looking at building resilience in communities and also supporting climate smart solutions and also supporting biotech innovations which help in improving farmer access to better and improved inputs varieties. So my name is Dr. Sheila Ochuboju. I am the Executive Director of the Alliance for Science. And as you can see, this is a gender-rich panel. Our session on Saturday is very much looking at women at the frontiers of climate change in terms of impact, but also women at the frontiers of solutions. And these are three extraordinary women who are at the frontiers of different types of solutions, and I will introduce them separately. I'd like to start with my sister friend and colleague to my left, Dr. Rose Mwabiza, who is the director of the Climate Technology Center and Network. And this is a global UNFCCC mechanism that promotes technologies for climate smart solutions, and particularly for vulnerable communities and particularly gender inclusive technologies. To my far left is my other sister friend, Dr. Tassila Banda. She's representing today the Network of African Women Environmentalists, a community group that has been active. It's within the, it was grown out of the UNEP, and it's a community that has been supporting landscape restoration issues and conversations around supporting women who are working on restoration of the environments and their landscapes. So she will talk a little bit about the work that she's been doing, particularly in Zambia, in agroforestry and forestry landscape restoration. And of course, we cannot be at a COP like this and not have a youth voice. So I'm very pleased to introduce one of our young tech innovators, Cheryl Mboya from Kenya, because youth tech innovations are going to be part of the future solutions that will make us resilient. So this panel is looking at where are the opportunities for investing in technologies, people, communities to build resilience, and moving us from talking so much about relief, because as we are waiting for relief, wherever it comes from, be it finance, be it humanitarian aid, we still have to build our resilience so that come next year and the year after, perhaps we will be asking for less of that relief aid because we will have been able to strengthen our inherent resilience capacity. So I would like to, first of all, pass the mic to Dr. Rose to say a little bit about this subject and a little bit about what CTCN does. You'll hear more if you come to our event on Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheila, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The issue of resilience should come as no surprise to anyone at this COP, where hot on the heels of the COP, we witnessed some of the worst and most extreme weather events ever recorded in, living human history. And this was not limited to one part of the world. I work for the UN, and so I live in Europe because of my job. The headquarters of the UN Climate Technology Center and Network are hosted by the government of Denmark. So we witnessed the hot, scathing summers. We saw the floods and the utter destruction that happened in Pakistan and in Nigeria. And these are just examples of the disaster that's happening around the world. But UNEP hosts 15 multilateral environmental entity secretariats, including the CTCN that I work for, because the UNFCCC is a convening secretariat. Because we are operational, we sit with an operational UN entity. And every year in UNEP, we release the emissions gap report, and for the last couple of years, the adaptation gap report. So we are not being alarmist when we are telling you that we're really completely off track. And for the Climate Technology Center and Network, we have projects in 109 countries, and I can tell you from experience, climate change is not a thing of the future. We see communities starving to death in the Horn of Africa, people losing their livelihood. So it's truly about people and it's about nature. When we sit here and talk about greenhouse gas emissions and limiting global temperatures to 1.5 degrees, I think we miss the point when we don't put a human face to this. People's lives have been destroyed, people's livelihoods and incomes have been destroyed. But we also know there is a silver lining, that in fact it's within our ability as one of the most successful human beings to inhabit the planet right now to reverse a lot of the damage that we have done. So to use an example of the technology sphere where I work, the IPCC tells us with certainty that we have at least half the technologies we need to reverse greenhouse gas emissions, but even better to support adaptation and resilience in the communities that most need it. So why isn't it getting there? Why are communities suffering more? Why is loss and damage such a huge agenda? What do we need to do differently, better? What aren't we doing? And those are some of the things we do, supporting countries to access some of these life-saving technologies. And what I like particularly about what we do, it is not as complicated as people think. The things we do that support communities to create resilience are within our capacity. Most people are familiar with mitigation technologies. So one of the things we are doing is working with the Adaptation Fund in an adaptation accelerator to not only accelerate the development of adaptation and resilient technologies, but also to promote them. And I want to give an example of one technology. And the reason I give it is because I talked about the floods in Pakistan and in Nigeria as examples. It's called the slum dam technology. An innovator came to us and told us, I have a technology of a dam that inflates automatically when the lands are inundated with waters, such as when there are extreme rains, and absorbs all this water and collects it. That's the beauty of it. So it not only absorbs this water, but it collects it and the community can use it later for irrigation and other uses. We used it successfully in Burundi. The year prior to last year, they had extreme rains and there were floods. This year, those floods were contained because of that technology. The second I would like to give is in relation to hunger, because food and the ability for human dignity really to be maintained is in the ability for one to feed themselves and their family. It's the core of human dignity. And so for the hunger that we see, for example, in the Horn of Africa, where millions of people are starving, we know that in Southern Africa, in the beautiful kingdom of Eswatini, we've deployed a technology using multiple small, digitally driven unmanned aerial vehicles, or drones as you call them, that are guided by satellite, that this country is using for their agricultural sector, for irrigation, for monitoring crop production and harvesting. And it has completely transformed the agricultural sector in that country. They are able to produce all the food they need, and it has reduced the number of people going without food. I could tell you a lot of stories. You can tell I'm passionate about what I do, because as I said, for me it's about people, it's about nature and this beautiful planet that we live on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rose. I'd like to introduce a welcome to Scylla to this discussion. And because Tassila has particularly worked with communities on the ground level, so mapping the landscape and looking at what types of technologies are needed. Because technology in itself is not the solution. Technology itself has to situate itself within the context, and it has to be appropriate, it has to be inclusive, and it has to be introduced in a way that a community can hold on to it to make it sustainable. So I'd like her to share a little bit about her experiences in working, mapping out landscapes with communities and applying technologies that are relevant.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, organizer, for this event. It's a very important event. On women on the frontier of climate action. It's good to be on a very well balanced, we are still waiting for the men to come, panel such as this one, where at least we can showcase the opportunities for building climate resilience. I think the key word is building. Sometimes we want to have things that are instant, like we have instant coffee and things like that. But when you talk about building, it takes time. And we need to keep this in mind, that what we are doing on the ground, especially in a space where I work, is building the resilience, and you have to build it one stone and one element at a time in a very integrated manner. The example that I'm going to be sharing on Saturday comes from a landscape in the eastern province of Zambia. I would be very happy to share with the members present at that time on how we have gone about building climate resilience with the communities there, engaging with non-state actors, traditional leadership, engaging with women groups, engaging with youth in different elements that all work together to build this climate resilience. I think the key question that I would really like to tackle is how. I would like to showcase best practices that can be taken up as models in different parts of not just Africa, but also the world, on how you can actually get these examples and apply them in different places to be able to achieve the goals of climate resilience. Part of the things that we have done related to proper participatory land use planning. Number 2, inclusive finance through what we call sub-grants to communities that are buying into the need to be able to participate in climate action. Number 3, introduction of technologies, especially around climate smart agriculture. You will have so many things that need to happen there in terms of soil fertility, in terms of water management, in terms of agroforestry, and introduction of some key good crops that will bring good livelihood income, alternative income to the communities. There is also sustainable forest management and also wildlife management, because the landscape is not in isolation. It's an integrated system with so many ecosystems in it. So when we build resilience, we are not building just to respond to agriculture or just to respond to the need of forestry or wildlife. We are bringing all these elements together because this is how they are on the ground. This is how they are playing out. So please join us on Saturday so that you can hear more about what we are doing in Zambia. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Cecilia. So I'd like to introduce our young innovator, Cheryl Mboya. She's from Kenya, and Kenya is very close to our heart. Is where our Global South Hub for the Alliance for Science is based. And that was launched this year, even though we actually have been working in the Global South for 8 years. So we work very closely with scientists and research communities in Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and Zambia increasingly. And what we've been doing is supporting scientists that are working on bringing about improved varieties of seeds, those that are drought tolerant, flood resistant, and that can withstand abiotic stresses such as salt in the soil, poor soil conditions. All of these are necessary for our farmers to have more choices and sustain livelihoods, and also to reduce impact of pesticide on the environment and in people's lives. We need to get more pest-resistant varieties because, as we're seeing with climate change, the proliferation of pests is increasing. So we have a lot of those challenges. Kenya is a great place where there's so much innovation. There's so many young people doing so many extraordinary things. Of course, it's a climate hub because UNEP has a campus there. And so it's an interesting nexus of technology, young people, innovations, research, science. And so that's why our Global South Hub is there. And that's why Cheryl, as an example of one of our young innovators, is really our hope for climate resilient futures. These are the young people who need to be sitting at this table, taking over from us as the years come, and be able to talk about what is needed for their generation to be able to prosper. Go ahead.
So good afternoon all. I'm Cheryl Mboya from Nairobi. So just to briefly mention, Nairobi is known and is termed to be the Silicon Savannah of Africa. That is because we have seen the rise and advancements of technology in Nairobi within the African continent. However, also to mention, we have seen more youthful voices being innovative and producing innovative solutions and products that can be able to solve or address challenges that mankind faces, the environment faces, and basically the whole ecosystem faces. So I'm glad to be involved in this panel as a youthful voice. So basically just to highlight a few of the innovations that Kenya and basically Kenyan youths are bringing about. We have drone footage, or rather drone technologies from the Kenya Airways Fahari Innovation Hub that they're using to solve several challenges such as medical supplies. They're also doing also agricultural development with the drones. Also, we have seen other innovators producing, it's called Basigo. They are basically a sustainable transport system in Kenya where they're bringing electric vehicles to be able to solve the rather huge public service vehicles that we have that are rather contaminating the environment. We also have, as an innovator, I am innovating edible tableware. Basically, I rather love to term it, you know how you can eat your ice cream cone after having your ice cream? So basically, you can eat your cup, your plate, your spoon after your meal. And if not, you can throw it on land, and it's able to be consumed by both plants, animals, and fishes. So we also have other innovators developing rather meaningful innovations that tackle the challenge of the triple planetary crisis, which involves the climatic crisis, plastic pollution, biodiversity loss, and food systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. So yes, we are beginning to find innovations that sit well within the communities. So at Alliance for Science, we very much talk about biotech innovations because that's our historic place in terms of the the scientific community that we engage with. But biotech sits across a spectrum. So you have biotech solutions in climate change, you have biotech solutions in global health. We saw with the COVID pandemic that there are many biotech solutions in terms of innovations of the vaccines, but without good science communication, uptake of those innovations is very low because the pace of innovation is so fast and that people don't have enough information to make choices, to make decisions. So that's our role at Alliance for Science, is building alliances with scientific communities, social innovators, tech communities who sit within the context of the Global South, also so that they can learn from each other. as Cheryl was speaking, I remember a few years ago when I went to Indonesia and we were offered food on the banana leaf. And I was like, why are we not all eating from banana leaf as plates rather than with plates, you know? So you're eating the food and you know there's a sustainable solution. So it's really wonderful that our young people are also beginning to think of those challenges of tableware and plastics after food. But I'd like to come to Dr. Rose because I know that last year or 2 years ago, you have an innovation challenge where young people come together and have some tech solutions. And I remember last year, one of your champions had developed something around drying of salt. I think it was in Côte d'Ivoire. Yes, and it was really wonderful. I wonder if you could speak to that.
Thank you very much, Sheila. And the young people are really amazing. I like the idea of having your dinner and eating your plate and cutlery along with it from our young innovator. I think that's quite a concept you have. Congratulations on your innovation. But just to say, I was yesterday at an event with the secretary to the IPCC, and I think he made an important point. He said, you see, we may call these people young, but we talk about 2035 and 2050, they are going to be us. And they are really going to look back, and I believe they will be proud that they did a good job with the kind of innovations they are doing. So in Côte d'Ivoire, for example, the traditional salt-making process involved destructions of mangroves. And what we did, and this is where the importance of innovation, but also endogenous knowledge communities have had for years that we forgot that we use. A salt drying technique that used to be used in France, where they use the power of the sun with a mixture of slag that doesn't require them to burn the mangroves and the other coastal fauna. And that completely transformed how Côte d'Ivoire, stopped destroying its coastline. So the idea is that high-tech innovations, like our young innovator, to local knowledge, going back to what we used to do better, that is not destructive or deleterious to the nature that we live in.
Thank you so much. The final word I'll actually give to Dr. Tassila, because I want to just follow up on the work you're doing with traditional leaders and looking at these indigenous innovations that we can now add tech to enhance and to scale, but recognizing and amplifying knowledge that already is living within communities and finding solutions from within.
I think we all agree that the primary custodians of our natural resources are traditional leaders and the communities themselves. And sometimes we are under the misconception that when we arrive in places of intervention, we are introducing something they should be doing. I think for me as a young scientist already, I used to know that this is not the way to go, because I grew up from this traditional background where my family is part of the traditional rulers clan. So in terms of the work that we do for climate resilience, we have made sure that the major component and the beginning of every solution, when we identify, first from the identification of what the challenges are, I think when you talk about the forest sector, you are talking about drivers of deforestation, drivers of degradation, for example, is to understand what they know themselves as traditional leaders and people in the communities around the ecosystems that we want to support. And this has helped a lot because there is no one size fits all in terms of the solutions. We are getting the solutions as and when we get to the locations where we are trying to make the interventions. The only thing that we have been able to bring is the inclusive finance. Because when the communities have done the participatory land use planning, they are able to identify the climate actions that will make their lives better. For example, if the rivers have dried up and they still want to have the ability to grow certain crops at short term, maybe horticultural crops or long-term tree crops, The need there is water. So we have been able to provide financing for them to be able to bring water near where these fields are. So I think the longer story will be shared on Saturday. I'm being alerted that we've run out of time. But yes, indeed, non-state actors like traditional leaders are very, very important in the equation. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. See you on Saturday.